Thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. A Glimpse of the Kingdom can remain free because of generous donors like you. If you'd like to donate, feel free to do so online, or you can send payments through Facebook Messenger. Don't forget to tell your friends about it so that they can enjoy this ministry as well. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any podcasts.
You can listen to my daddy every single day, like in the gym, in the car, or just at home. Glimpse of the Kingdom is awesome!
Hello, and thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I am David Pendergrass. If you haven't already, be sure to check out my blog, davidpendergrass.com, and my Twitter feed and so forth. I think you'll be happy that you did. I want to continue this podcast, pick up part 2 of just where we left off last time, and I'm responding to Seth Andrews, who is a former Christian and now is an atheist, goes around doing talks about his deconversion, and this talk was called Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot. Let's jump back in.
When I was a believer, a faithful believer, I would shrug and say, whatever will be, will be. It's all part of God's master plan. Everything happens for a reason. A church roof collapses on its worshipers in Nigeria. There must be a purpose. It's all part of God's plan. Everything happens for a reason. 12-year-old boy decapitated on a water slide in Kansas City. There must be a purpose, a grand design. Everything happens for a reason. 300 reindeer are struck by lightning in Norway. There must be a purpose. Everything happens for a reason. 30,000-ish people will starve to death worldwide today. Well, there must be a divine plan, a purpose. Everything happens for a reason. It'll all just work out. The Bible tells us, we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and those who are called according to His purpose. We sort of speak in these saccharine bumper stickers in the faith. They teach us to talk like this.
Well, once again, I concur to some degree. I never say everything happens for a reason. Ever. I just don't say that. And because when I hear people say it, most, if not all the time, they are implying that it happens for God's reasons, which implies God is the causal agent for why something occurred. I do not find that compelling. I do not think the biblical worldview is one where God is the causal agent for everything. Is it true that everything happens for a reason? Of course it is true in general. Of course it is. That is to say, there is a cause for every effect. There is a cause for every effect. I think that's very much true. So in that sense, if you mean everything happens for a reason, sure. I drop a pencil and it goes to the ground. Well, why did it go to the ground? Why did you have a pencil go to the ground? Well, I had a pencil in my hand. Well, what was the reason for that? Well, I grabbed it out of the cup. What was the reason for that? Because I wanted to write on a piece of paper. What was the reason? On and on and on and on and on and on it goes. All the way back to the origin of the universe, which I think is an effect, which have a cause. If you're a naturalist, there is no cause. The universe just popped out of no reason. I find that unconvincing. So to go back to the usage as it relates to God, I do not think God is the causal agent between all things. For example, if I drop the pencil and it goes to the ground and I say, what happened? I don't think God did it. I don't think God pushed the pencil down to the ground. I think God designed the universe to function in certain routine ways that we call laws. I don't like that word much now these days because so many people use law in a way it's not intended. A law is what typically happens. Nevertheless, I think there are certain routines or patterns that God has put inside the universe that are explanatory enough. Various energies and forces and so forth that we don't fully understand just yet, but I'm okay with that. I still don't think God pushed my pencil down to the ground. I don't think He did, and I find no biblical reason to think He pushed it down to the ground. So in that sense, I would never say there's a reason for my pencil going down that's God, or God is the causal agent. If Christians mean there's a reason for it, meaning God knows about that event, of course that's true. God knows all true propositions. So what was the reason behind the roof falling down on people at their church. Perhaps there was poor infrastructure, poor architectural planning. Perhaps there was an earthquake. What about people who drown when a tsunami comes? Well, it's because humans can't breathe underwater. And so we drown when we get water in our lungs. I'm not sure what the problem here is. Why did a person break their leg when they fell off the roof? Because humans can't withstand that kind of force? Because we can't fly? Because we can't float? Because bones are not impenetrable to damage? If you mean God did it, God sent the earthquake and God sent the tsunami and so forth, there are Christians who believe that. Not most, but there are people who do. I'm not one of them. Again, I do not think God is the causal agent of all events or storms and so forth. I think God designed a universe that could develop planets, and ours was one of them. And our planet has tectonic shifts. And when that happens, it causes what we call an earthquake, which causes major movements on the earth. One of the byproducts of our Earth's development and these major changes in climate and earthquakes, tsunamis, is that humans can die. As an atheist, who cares? We're just evolved primates, and death is part of the accidental nature of the universe. As a Christian theist, I can also say who cares in this one regard. At no point in the history of Christianity or Judaism have we ever been told or promised once again that we will always be protected physically. We're not told that by the Lord Jesus, by God the Father. It's not, the Spirit has never said that we are to be protected at all times. There's no divine promise. Once again, Jesus himself was hurt and killed. The Apostle Paul, go to 2 Corinthians, anyway, I go for a long time about that. The last thing he mentioned was in Romans. Let me say a quick word about that. In Romans chapter 8, verses, all the verses matter, but particularly in verses 18 and following, he talks about suffering. And in the context of Romans 8 and suffering, we are all the present sufferings. He says in verse 18, "For I consider that our present sufferings cannot even be compared to the glory that will be revealed to us." And he goes on for a while about creation. It's some great, great scripture verses. In the context of suffering, and in verse 26, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. And suffering and weaknesses, it's in that context that Paul says in verse 28, "For we know that all things work together for the good, for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose." It is not what it cannot mean. It cannot mean that God will make sure or prohibit our suffering. In context, Paul doesn't say such a thing. He says, in the midst of our suffering and weakness, the Spirit is active. He's helping us pray, and the glory that is to come is be far outweighed. In the end of it all, and the glory that is to revealed, it will all work out for those who are called according to his purpose. It cannot be, one more time, it cannot be exegetically interpreted the way he's doing it or implying. And many, many Christians imply it. They really think when they read the verse, it means everything. I'll always get the job I want. I'll get that BMW. I'll always get my daughter or my son freed from cancer. It will always work out for good because I love him, and that's Romans 8:28. But in context, that's not what Paul means. It is not a promise that whatever we ask, whatever we want, and whatever we think is good will occur. That's not how Paul's using the vocabulary. At least, that's not how he's using it in my understanding. Maybe it is to you, but in my reading of the context in the document, Paul does not mean that. So, I do think it's true that for those who love God and those who are given their faith in Jesus and are disciples of Jesus, God is working and orchestrating all kinds of events until the end of our lives. And we're not guaranteed a long, prosperous life. But until that point, he's working in the midst of what we go through, including our sufferings. But our sufferings have context. No matter how bad it is, it's nothing compared to the glory that is to come.
The meme-verse is full of this stuff. Here's just a few examples. This one's one I saw spread on social media. It says, God never shuts one door without opening another. Actually, when God closes a door, he opens a window. Actually, sometimes God has to shut the door for our own benefit and protection, and there is no window. Until God opens the next door, praise him in the hallway. Have you guys seen that Betty Bowers meme with Jesus knocking on the door? It sums up the mission statement of Christianity perfectly. Jesus knocks and says, let me in. Why? So I can save you. From what? From what I'm going to do to you if you don't let me in. The one who threatens to torture us has come to rescue us from torture. And in the church, we proudly brandished these messages, on our jewelry and on our bumper stickers and on our here's an actual Christian t-shirt. Warning, exposure to the sun, S-O-N, may prevent burning. We thought this was profound, but what did we sound like?
It's another saying I never say. I never, ever say, if God closes the door, he opens the window. Yeah, nevertheless, even though I never say it because it just sounds silly to me. It sounds cheesy. Nevertheless, if the sentiment that people mean by that saying is, when God wants to make a way, he's going to make a way, then that's true. That's true. Pick any analogy you want, but that's true. But he doesn't like that saying, or at least doesn't like the sentiment. And then that meme or saying that he says sums up perfectly the message of Christianity. That Jesus knocking on the door and it says, if you don't let me in, I'm going to come in there and torture you. So let me save you from the torture I'm about to inflict on you. And then, of course, they'll laugh and laugh and laugh. How sad. If I thought that was the perfect summary of Christianity, I'm not sure I'd be a Christian either. It always makes me wonder when people say this stuff, what kind of faith did they have? What kind of Christian thinks that Jesus is looking out for ways to torture people? What is he talking about? If he is implying of divine punishment, okay, but I'm not sure what's funny. Let's imagine the same analogy. Let's say that Jesus comes and knocks on the door, and you're behind the door, and you're holding people hostage, and you've already killed people, and you've already done horrible things. And imagine it's not Jesus for a second, but Jesus, say it's a guy who's the judge. He's got a bulletproof vest. He comes to the door, knocks on the door, and says, please don't do this. Please don't do this. Please let me come inside, talk you down, and walk you out. Let me try to save you. And you scream back, no, F you, I'm not coming out. I don't care you. I don't want to know anything about you. Forget you. To which the judge says, I have absolutely the right to command the SWAT team to come in here and take you down because of what you've done. But I don't want that to happen. Please let me in. The only way you make it out of this thing alive is if I come inside right now to help you out. And that's what these kinds of analogies by atheists always have in common as mistake. They always assume in their analogies about Jesus' torture and punishment, whatever, that they're not horrible sinners who deserve punishment. And this is where they start, oh, you think I'm like Hitler? No, I don't think all atheists are Hitler. I think most atheists in the world are not like Hitler. It is irrelevant. We don't judge morality based on the worst possible example. We judge morality based on the standard of goodness. I don't judge a ruler's markings of inches and centimeters by my 3-year-old daughter's pictures when she was 3 years old. I judge it by the standard of how rulers are supposed to be. You and I deserve the SWAT team. And he has every right to do what he's going to do if we say no.
How much do devout Christians know about the Bible they pitch and promote as true? The Bible that's on their t-shirts, on their cross necklaces, and on those fish symbols on their cars. How much do they really know about the Bible? Well, a guy named Stephen Prothero was the chairman of the religion department at Boston University. He wrote a 2007 book called Religious Literacy, What Every American Needs to Know and Doesn't. And he went out and surveyed people, religious and non-religious people alike, to find out just how much they knew and didn't know about the Bible on their nightstands or whatever. And the results were fascinating. 60% of Americans can't name even 5 of the 10 commandments. They usually remember the one about adultery and thou shalt not commit murder, thou shalt not steal, and then you see them start to drift, right? But if you were to ask them in advance, what are the most important commandments ever given to humankind? Well, the 10 commandments. What are they?
I will agree with a lot of what he's saying and will say in this section, because biblical illiteracy and ignorance amongst Christians is embarrassing. I mean, it's ridiculous. I liken it, I was a Boy Scout for 3 years as a kid. It's like being a Boy Scout for several years and not knowing anything about scouting, never opening the Boy Scout manual, never reading, you don't know how to camp. You don't know how to tie knots. You don't know how to fish. You don't know how to do anything hardly at all. You don't know anything. I mean, it's shameful. But just very quickly, the 10 Commandments, usually most people would answer to say the biggest or most important commandments given in the 10 Commandments. I think they're wrong. The 10 Commandments served their purpose 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, but not with Jesus. Jesus did not just simply restate the 10 Commandments. In fact, he didn't restate the 10 Commandments. He restated 9 of them. And the 10 Commandments do not trump the authority of Jesus. So in Christianity, please do not say or think that the 10 Commandments are the basis of our morality. I hope you'll go listen to my podcast on morality. I have, 5 or 6 weeks I did a study on morality. It's worth your time. Please go listen to that study on morality. There's a lot more there. But the 10 Commandments are not the basis of Christian morality. They're just not. And there's a lot more there, but here we go.
Right? They can remember all of the lyrics to Gilligan's Island, but they can't remember even half of the most important commandments ever given to humankind. Only 1/3 of the people surveyed could tell you who gave the Sermon on the Mount. Only 1/3 knew it was Jesus. 75% said that the sentence, God helps those who help themselves, is written in the Bible. It appears nowhere in the Christian scriptures. 50% of high school seniors think Sodom and Gomorrah are married. "10% of people surveyed think Noah's wife is Joan of Arc." Woo. And the experts, they don't give us anything more to work with because they're busy contradicting each other at every turn.
This is the part of the podcast where the presentation I was excited about a little bit, because I thought, oh, he's about to cite some experts, that is, scholars in the field. But listen to whom he calls an expert in Christianity.
Both sides of the mouth fully engaged. You got apologists like Dr. James Dobson. They write whole books declaring that when God doesn't make sense, it's more proof that he's there and that he's God. Right? The book's called When God Doesn't Make Sense. And it essentially posits that an understandable, proven God, a sensible God, something we could digest and figure out, well, that God then wouldn't be God-like if he can be understood by insects like human beings, so he must be confusing and beyond our capacity. And that there is proof that God exists.
I've never heard James Dobson called an apologist. The book he's referencing was written over 20 years ago, and I'm not going to say much at all about it. He doesn't have to find it compelling. But the idea that James Dobson is an apologist and his voice represents the Christian view on this issue that he's implying is nonsense. I mean, this is nonsense to pick up one book and say, see what Christians say? They're idiots. I mean, this is nonsense. He's not done. Let's hear what he says.
Right? We have to have faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Faith, as it says in Hebrews, is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. This is a verse designed to sound profound while making absolutely no sense. Have you noticed? Faith has substance because it reflects what we hope is going to happen. And then that substance of hope serves as evidence for that which we do not have evidence for.
This kind of... I'm not sure why he thinks this verse was written to sound profound. What evidence would Seth have for that? Where in the book of Hebrews or anywhere in the New Testament, or is there another document he has that no other person possesses that lets us know the motivation of the author of Hebrews as he writes that verse? I don't find his understanding of Hebrews' motivation convincing. Secondly, in Hebrews 11, chapter 1, it says this, and the NET translation is good. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for, being convinced of what we do not see. That is just classic parallelism, synonymous parallelism, which means both phrases mean the same thing. It's just restated in a little different way. Faith of being sure of what we hope for, convinced of what we do not see, mean the same thing. It's the author's way of saying, in context, that good, powerful word, that those Jews who are Christians, who are abandoning their faith because of sufferings they're experiencing, should not do that. And the author of Hebrews gives several reasons why a person should not abandon their faith. I wonder if Seth actually read this book before he decided to abandon the faith. But nevertheless, in context, this, what we call a chapter 11, is a whole chapter of evidences of biblical stories of various characters who did the right thing, even though doing the right thing caused them, at times, some bad things to happen, because they're waiting on something in the future. He sums up these things some went through. Look down in verse 36. And others experienced mocking and flogging, even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, sawed apart, murdered with the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins. They were destitute, afflicted, ill-treated. They wandered in deserts and mountains and caves and openings in the earth. And these all were commended for their faith, yet they did not receive what was promised, for God had provided something better for us, so that they would be made perfect together with us. Now, in context of the document, he means an inheritance found in faith in Jesus Christ. Now, I use different metaphors. Inheritance. At the very end of chapter 12, he calls it an unshakable kingdom. You might say salvation. All these things, those things are coming. So encouraging his audience, the author of Hebrews is saying, that's what faith is about. It's trusting that we will receive what has been promised that we will receive. That's it. In other words, they don't see it now because we don't have it now. I had faith that I would receive a diploma when I went to my undergraduate. And then I got it. I had faith I'd get a diploma when I got a master's. Then I got it. I had faith when I got a PhD. Then I got it. I had faith that it would happen. I didn't see it. I didn't have it. But I had faith that I was going to have it. What so many people do is import into this word an assumption that is not there. And that is idea of unreasonable or unfounded or ungrounded. That is, faith is what we might call a blind faith. It's just trust me. Just trust me. The entire book or letter or document of Hebrews shows the contrary. I just gave you some reasons in one full long chapter. He gives tons of evidence of why that faith is reasonable. The whole document gives reasons why that faith is reasonable. It is not blind faith. Read the book of Hebrews. It is full of evidences for his audience not to give up the faith, their expectation of receiving a reward or the inheritance or the kingdom. Don't give up that expectation. You have every reason to expect it, and don't give up even though you go through sufferings. It is not a blind faith. This is not meant to be impressive. It's meant just to tell the truth.
What do we sound like? I'd been taught since my earliest memories, faith always overcomes doubt. Doubt's a problem. Bible would tell us. Jesus said, when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. The one who doubts, they're like a wave of the sea. They're blown and tossed by the wind. And it goes further. It says that person shouldn't expect to receive anything from the Lord. Who's the one disciple that our Christian parents never told us to emulate and be like in our own life? They're like, be like John, be like Paul, grow up and be like Peter. Did they ever say, be like Thomas? Doubting Thomas? No. Why? Well, doubt's a problem. The other disciples, John 20:25. The other disciples therefore said unto him, we've seen the Lord. But he said unto them, except I shall see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe. He wanted evidence. He's my favorite disciple. Right? Show me the evidence. Let's get some peer review going. What did Jesus? Jesus rebuked him, right? He said, because you've seen me, you believe. Blessed are those who have not seen and believe. Have faith that it's happened. This is the essence of faith, right? I envision, I think, I suspect, I imagine, I believe, I want to believe, therefore I know. And yet the late Christopher Hitchens was really onto something when he said, you know, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. Bertrand Russell, where there's evidence, no one speaks of faith. We don't speak of faith that 2 and 2 are 4, or that the earth is round. We only speak of faith when we wish to substitute emotion for evidence. No problem.
Okay, there's so much here. Let me start at the end. I agree with Christopher Hitchens. Yeah, I said it. Faith is not the same as knowledge. I agree with that. Not in the way it's being used here in this context, that's true. If by, well, I'm not going to go along and talk about faith right now. I have a chapter on my book about that you can read. This last thing he said about faith when we want to substitute emotion. It's difficult to have conversations with people when they use terms that have radically different meanings. I encourage Christians very often, when you talk to a person who believes other things, don't assume you know what they believe. Ever, ever, ever. Just ask them. When they say, I believe in God, what does that mean? Which God? Who's God? When they say, I don't believe in God, the same thing. When they use the word faith, I know that's pedantic. I know that might be tedious, laborious, but if you want to have healthy communication, you've got to ask them, if you don't mind, explain that to me. Define that word for me. Here's another example. People who are no longer Christians and people never were in the first place, they always use this term incorrectly. If I were to tell you, you and I are sitting around and we're going to go to lunch and we're waiting on my wife to show up, and I say, and you say, where's your wife? She seems to be late. I go, I don't know, but I have faith that she's going to make it. And you go, oh, isn't that nice? You're just substituting reason for emotion. I mean, you wouldn't say that. That would be stupid. You wouldn't say that. Nobody says that. Everybody who's rational in the least bit would assume that knowing my wife as her husband, I have every reason to assume that what I do not see and be confident in what I hope for will occur because I know her. I have faith that she will appear. That's not emotion. I have reason to trust her because 99% of the time she shows up. And 99% of the time, there's a reason why she's late if and when it happens. I have every reason to have faith. That is biblical faith. Do I have knowledge that she will appear any second? No, I don't, because I cannot prognosticate. I can't see the future. She could have a flat tire. She might have died. She might have all kinds of horrible, ridiculous, she might have been kidnapped. I don't know that she's coming. I don't have knowledge of that event. I have faith in that event because I trust her. But I have every reason to trust her. But until she appears in our presence to go to lunch, I cannot use the word I know. Now, I can loosely. I could say, I know she's going to come. I know she'll make it. But that just really means I believe she will. I have faith that she will. I don't know it because it hasn't happened yet. Right, I agree in that sense. Faith in that sense is not knowledge because it hasn't happened yet. But that's not the only way to use the word faith in the Bible. To go backwards, when he mentions, quote-unquote, doubting Thomas, he shouldn't be called doubting Thomas in the first place. The Bible never calls him doubting Thomas. This is the same Thomas who speaks basically twice in the narrative. And the first time is, we're going to go to Jerusalem. Even if we have to die for Jesus, die with him, we're going to die. This guy wants to take that discipleship seriously, picking up his cross seriously. We're going to do this. The second time he speaks is in John chapter 20, when he is not in the presence of Jesus, and he doesn't trust the other disciples' testimony that they have seen Jesus. So when Jesus appears and says, first off he says, verse 27, put your finger here and examine my hands. Extend your hand, put it in my side. Do not continue in unbelief, but believe. Thomas, of course, says, my Lord and my God. Then Jesus said, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are people who have not seen and yet have believed. Now, Seth, who's the speaker here, he says Jesus rebukes him. No, he doesn't. Jesus does not rebuke Thomas. He doesn't fuss at him. He didn't say, oh, you have little faith. How long have I got to put up with this horrible, sinful generation? He does that other places, not here. He just says, and blessed are the ones who don't get to touch my side. And they trust the disciples' testimony. Well, that's almost every person who's ever lived. I haven't touched the side of Jesus. I have to trust the testimony. I have a lot of reasons to trust it. That's not the only thing I believe. But Jesus is saying, and blessed is the one who doesn't have this great opportunity to do this. That's it. So, it's not arguing or reprimanding every single person need reasons. If that was Jesus' point, he would not have given Thomas evidence. He would have appeared in a dream or given a vision or a prophetic insight, or perhaps even shown up in the room and said, no, you're not touching junk. You should have believed. How dare you ask such a stupid question? You should have just believed. Have faith no matter what. Instead, he says, come touch. Jesus wants to give evidence. And that instance, in that regard, at that point, that's exactly what I'm going to do. He said, but blessed are those who don't have to do this. So you can demand that Jesus appear to you and show you his sides all you want. But if he doesn't, you'll just blame him and say, see, I knew you were fake. That's what will happen. But nevertheless, you can demand it if you want, just like Thomas. Thomas, for some great reason, got his wish granted. But other people don't always get that granted. But you can ask if you want. I don't. I don't need to see it. It'd be cool to see it, but I don't need to. I'm blessed. Even if I don't see his side, I'm going to see them face to face soon enough. And to end where he began on this rant is from the book of James. In the book of James, it has nothing to do with doubting faith. This is one of the most common things atheists use all the time. All the stinking time. In James chapter 1, early on in the book, I'll start in verse 5, because that's the verse, I'll just start it for time. If anyone is deficient in wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and without reprimand, and it will be given to him. But he must ask in faith without doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed around by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord, since he's a double-minded individual, unstable in all his ways. Now, I interpret this, and every New Testament interpreter I know interprets this, in context. James's point, or Jacob, the real name is real Jacob, that's his real name. Jacob's real point is that when you ask God for wisdom and receive it, don't doubt the wisdom that you have received from him. It makes you double-minded. That is, you don't go by earthly wisdom, go back and forth between worldly wisdom and his wisdom, worldly wisdom and his wisdom. If you're going to ask for it, he's never ever going to fuss at you. When you ask for God's advice, he'll never go, leave me alone. When my children, Dad, what should I do? I never fuss at them. They don't get grounded for asking for my advice. But when I give them my advice, don't listen to my advice and then run off and do whatever you do in the first place. That's James's point about God. It has nothing to do with having questions about the Christian faith in general. So see, these are all examples where simple context helps us. None of these reasons are good reasons not to be a Christian. None of these are good reasons to leave your faith. And none of these things make you sound like an idiot.
Another group of apologists spends all of its time explaining how God is indeed proven. He's all around us. It's so obvious. How could you miss it? Like this guy, Dr. Stephen Meyer. He's a Christian who works for the Discovery Institute, which is a religious organization posing as a scientific one. He has no first-hand training or degree in molecular biology, so obviously he decided to write a book on the subject. It's called Signature in the Cell. It's been roundly tossed out. But in the book, he makes this claim. He says, there is digital code in our DNA, our very genome, which looks like the signature of a designing intelligence somewhere. The proof is right under our microscopes, so to speak. It's amazing. It's proof. Meyer seems totally unconcerned with a God who would sign his name in such a way that humans wouldn't be able to see it until 200,000 years later, when they had finally developed the technology to read and understand the genome. Right? Jesus essentially is the hide-and-seek champion of the world.
Yeah, that line, the hide-and-seek champion of the world, he uses that in several times. I think he was trying to find a way to plug that in there. You can read Signature in the Cell for yourself. I have read it. Stephen Meyer, Dr. Meyer, does not argue that Jesus is in the cell. So I get the joke, I guess, but it's just not what Stephen Meyer says, and it's not a religious organization posed as science either. But these kind of caricatures, I mean, I guess they make a good joke. But the other thing is, what possible difference does it make that it takes time for humans to discover more and more about the universe? And if we discover more about the universe, and it makes us think, wow, God really is amazing, or this is more evidence of what we think God did, why would that be idiotic? His next long rant is about intelligent design and how much he doesn't like that because he thinks that things are not designed well, like people having birth defects or whales having a pelvis, things like that. I just don't care about all that stuff. So I'm going to skip ahead to more toward the end of this talk.
How did I get locked into this nonsensical feedback loop of what I call Jesus speak? God watches, but watch out. God protects, buckle up. God heals, call the doctor quick. God's revealed, go find him. God clearly works in mysterious ways. God is love and jealous and vengeful. Give God the glory, give people the responsibility. God gives wisdom. Then God uses the foolish things to shame the wise. Ask and receive, but his will be done anyway.
Of course, I'm not going to go through all of these and give the scripture reference to all of them and talk about context in all of them, because that would take a long time. What I appreciate about what Seth is saying is that when a non-Christian hears this stuff, it can sound like nonsense. Okay, so when you talk to a non-Christian, don't say this kind of stuff without nuancing and talk about the context and what you really mean. Within Christianity, hopefully, if you know your Bible well enough, it doesn't sound that idiotic because you know the context.
Where did I learn to talk like this? Well, I was taught by a religious mother and father. I was raised to accept, pretty much without question, Christian doctrine. We memorized Christian scriptures. We went to Christian church. When we couldn't go to church on Sunday, they made us stay home and watch it on television. If there is a hell, it is Christian church on television, trust me. Trained, programmed to speak and act like this. Learned behavior. I was this kid, right? Pretty short leash. I wasn't allowed to stray too far. Wasn't allowed to ask too many questions. They didn't come back with the answer, Jesus. My whole life was a theological hand-me-down. I was told reasoning's a problem. Don't trust your brain. You trust in the Lord with all your heart. Whatever you do, don't lean on your own understanding.
And here we see the problem with his background. I'm a Christian, and I'm a Christian parent. And at no time in my life has let me back up. I've been in church my entire life. My entire life. That doesn't mean I've gone every Sunday, but I mean in general, I've been in and out of church. Even when I intellectually left the faith and I stopped going for a while. But in general, I've always gone to church. I've been in many different denominations. I'm a pastor myself. At no point in the history of my life do I have any recollection of any person ever, any pastor, any youth pastor, any music minister, any professor, any teacher, ever telling me what he just said he was told. No one's ever told me not to reason. Don't use my brain. And the scripture verse about not relying upon your understanding means, earthly understanding meaning, unless God reveals information to you, don't think your own little thinking about how God is supposed to do things is good enough. Well, that's true. You don't know me. Let's imagine I'm talking to Seth. Seth doesn't know me. And Seth says, I got David all figured out. David believes X, Y, Z. And I go, don't do that. Don't trust your understanding. Trust mine. Wait till I reveal it to you. That's not a stupid assertion. That's common sense. And in any case, that kind of fundamentalism in which he grew up is very, very sad and unfortunate and horrible. And in my experience, and I know my experience is limited, but every single person I've ever heard or read about, and I know that's not everybody, but every person I've heard and read about who's abandoned the faith grew up in fundamentalist homes. They were taught not to, they were not to think critically about stuff and to be anti-science and anti-evolution and anti-everything. And then they rebel. Bart Ehrman, the most well-known atheist New Testament scholar, grew up in a fundamentalist home, went to fundamentalist schools. And fundamentalists don't represent Christianity. They just don't. They don't. And it's unfortunate. Very, very sad. It breaks my heart. I don't blame people when they abandon the faith, when they think the faith is only that particular kind of faith that one can adhere to. If you find yourself in a circumstance where you've heard these same kinds of things that Seth is responding against, let me encourage you, please don't think that understanding of anti-intellectualism and anti-study and anti-science and anti-everything is the only way to do it. I mean, I'm genuinely that's one reason I don't do these kind of podcasts. It genuinely makes me very sad that this kind of response is what he had and so many people have. And then he goes around and proselytizing many others to go, oh, well, if that's Christianity, then it is stupid. And then others have to come back around and try to disabuse them. And usually the door's been shut for so long, they don't care anymore. Anecdotes and quibs and funny pictures on PowerPoint are enough to convince a lot of people, and it's over with. It's a caricature, and it's unfortunate.
A well-propagated lie must be the truth. I mean, of course, it's the most popular book ever printed. Of course, that's true. That's their proof. Its agents were God's prophets, and of course, if they laughed at these guys, they had their own prophets that they embraced and accepted and promoted. I was taught to be proudly ignorant of basic science. I must say, it was when I discovered the work of Richard Dawkins, and I started to read about some facts. It was when I picked up books like Why Evolution is True by Jerry Coyne, when I met and saw the work of people like Dr. Donald Prothero, and I began to learn the facts of evolution. I was nearly 40 when it happened. Where had I been? What happened to me? Well, I'd been cut from someone else's cloth. I'd been wearing somebody else's skin. I'd been speaking in somebody else's voice. I'd excused my own bigotry through sanctimony and self-righteousness. I'd rejected the wonders in thousands of books so that I could hold and clutch desperately to just the one book. For me, Alejandro Jodorowsky's quote proved true. Birds born in a cage think flying is an illness. That was me. Finally, in my late 30s, I spread my wings. I flew the religious coop, so to speak. I came late to the party, but I am here, and for what it's worth, I'm glad to be here. Despite all my flaws and failings, despite the fact that I'm not a great thinker, I'm not a great physicist, I'm not a great philosopher, I don't have greatness in that way in me. I'm just a guy trying to figure it out here at midlife, trying to live truthfully. You know, I want to embrace and pursue good ideas. I want to root myself in the evidence. I want to pledge myself to reasonable words, to say things that make sense, to pursue real wisdom. As best I can, to thank the helpers, the humans, the agents of charity, praise the cook, thank the physician, support the science, encourage the skeptic, to pursue the solutions that don't cheat me and dilute me and enslave me and make me a poster child for illogic. And perhaps one day we will see better ideas prevail. I want to leave you with an encouragement that you are part of that fight on every level. In your families, in your homes, in your neighborhoods, in your friends, in your offices, in your schools, in your social circles, on the internet, as activists, as human beings. As rationalists, you are part of the solution. What you do and say matters. You are making a difference. And I encourage you to continue to do so. After all, what we all really want is not to kill God. We simply want a personal relationship with reality. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Well, that's it. You hear the repeated emphasis more and more and more these days. If you're a Christian, if you didn't know this emphasis upon basic atheistic proselytization. If you're a Christian with your head in the sand, proverbially speaking, and you don't realize that there's a massive war out there spiritually and I might say on social media for the hearts and minds of people, you're delusional. You're in denial. You've got to get your hand out of the sand to see that it is all around us. That the books, the YouTube videos, the podcast are everywhere for atheism and all kinds of anti-theism that is possible, and it's only increasing exponentially all the time. Now, praise Jesus, there's a lot of Christian stuff out there, but a lot of the Christian stuff is nonsense. Well, at least it seems to me. I mean, you have people arguing that dinosaurs were a few thousand years ago. I mean, I think that's nonsense, and you might be very hurt by that, but I don't find that very. I think it's nonsense. Anyway, because I think it's nonsense, the Christians have a lot of work to do, and it won't all, in my view, it's not going to happen just from the universities and so forth. The real change that happens in culture here in America, and I think around the world, will be the lay movement. It will occur in social media. I can give you many examples of that. I hear it and see it all the time online when people repeat the same things, like in this talk, the same things about doubt and faith. And I might have other podcasts or Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and so forth. It's the same stuff over and over and over and over again. When you read literature at a higher level of what people are actually saying who study in the field, they don't say that. Those are not arguments they find compelling at all. No one does in the field. You can't show up to professional meetings and make those kinds of statements. They'd be laughed out immediately. But they can make 5,000 videos on YouTube and get 500,000 viewers to watch it, and then because it's on YouTube and popular, or get some zingers and some anecdotes, all of a sudden people go, "What? That sounds good to me." So my only point is that I think is going to be the most influential thing possible. And it's true in the church. In the church, the most influential people in the church are not people who are specialists. They're pastors. And not just any old pastors, they're megachurch pastors. Once you make it to a certain level where you have a large church and you start writing some books that are popular, they become the most influential people in Christianity. I'm convinced of it. Ask people in general the kind of books they're reading and the people they watch online, the sermons they listen to, the people they listen to. They're not reading specialists. They're not. They're reading people with undergrads or maybe master's degree. And those people read other people who are also just pastors. Now, I am a pastor. I'm not dogging pastors. I don't think all pastors are idiots. What I'm saying is most people in ministry are not specialists in the field. And so the people who are the most influential aren't specialists in scholarship. They're people who are non-specialists. That doesn't mean they're all wrong, but that's still my point. Both in Christianity and atheism and anything, probably in American culture, non-specialists are having the most influence. And I think that's can be very good, very powerful. I think it's outstanding that certain Christian pastors have very popular podcasts and so forth. My goodness, I mean, Jesus can use wonderful things. But there's a great danger in that when non-specialists who can't nuance and don't know how to do proper exegesis and don't do biblical languages, and I mean, anyway, great harm can come. And it can harm people like Seth who don't know better and hear pastors and see the TV evangelist and whatever talk about non-specialists, people like them, John Hagee and all these people who are, anyway. Well, so sister and brother, there's my in response to Seth Andrews. Christianity made me talk like an idiot. Christians can talk like idiots. They can. Atheists can talk like idiots too. I'm not sure what point you draw from that. I don't think most of the things he said here were idiotic. I think most of the things he said in this talk were completely irrelevant, ripped out of context, and nothing to do with anything that would demonstrate Christianity is false. Other things, though, as I conceded many times, I agree with them. So you make up your own mind, do your own reading, and make your own thinking. I'm not here to tell you what to think or believe, but these are my thoughts. God bless you. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really do hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you'll listen more. If you want more, go to davidpendergrass.com. There are tabs at the top that let you have access to all the podcasts I've recorded, to sermons I've done, books I've written. They're all there at davidpendergrass.com. You can also check me out on Facebook, facebook.com/glimpse of the kingdom, facebook.com/glimpse of the kingdom, and also look at my Twitter feed at glimpse the kingdom. Or at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass. There's tons of ways reached out. I hope you will. Send me your questions, send me your comments. If you'd like to support the ministries of Glimpse of the Kingdom, you can also find ways to give online on davidpendergrass.com. If you'd like for me to come and do some consulting, check out my website, davidpendergrassconsulting.com, and I'll be happy to come out and speak to your organization and help and train any way I can. God bless you. See you online.